Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the New York City Council hearing on the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection. At this time, please silence all electronics and do not approach the dais. I repeat, please do not approach the dais. If you want to testify, make sure you fill out a slip at the back of the room with the Sergeant at Arms. If you wish to testify online, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. That is testimony@council.nyc.gov. If you need any additional assistance, please contact the Sergeant. Chair, you may begin.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie Menin, Chair of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection, and I want to welcome everyone to today's hearing. First of all, I want to acknowledge my colleagues who are present, Councilmember Riley and Councilmember Marte, and I'll acknowledge additional colleagues as they join us. So thank you again for joining today's hearing on consumer financial experiences in the retail industry, as well as Bill Introductions 374, 1049, and 1097. Retail establishments in New York City are required to comply with a variety of local laws that seek to protect consumers from deceptive and unfair business practices. DCWP is responsible for, of course, enforcing those consumer protection laws and educating both consumers and businesses about their rights and obligations under them. The agency's work to inspect businesses can have real impacts on New Yorkers' pocketbooks. When I served as commissioner of DCWP, we implemented a major investigation into grocery stores after finding that some major players, including Whole Foods in particular, routinely overstated the weights of its pre-packaged products such as meats, dairy, and baked goods, resulting in customers routinely being overcharged. Whole Foods ultimately agreed to pay $500,000 and agreed to adhere in our agreement with them to strict preventive and corrective standards to better protect consumers as part of a settlement agreement with DCWP. At today's hearing, I look forward to hearing how DCWP is approaching enforcement of consumer protection laws in retail settings. We'll learn about their inspection strategy and how the agency educates businesses about their obligations and consumers about their rights. We will also examine how the agency is addressing consumer complaints regarding retail establishments. We are today hearing three pieces of legislation related to consumers' financial experiences in retail establishments. Intro 374, sponsored by Councilmember Keith Powers, would prohibit businesses from setting a minimum purchase requirement greater than $10 for credit card transactions. Intro 1049, sponsored by Councilmember Brooks Powers, would require sellers of petroleum products for use in motor vehicles or motorboats to disclose pre-authorization holds prior to initiating a transaction that would require a pre-authorization hold. And then finally, Introduction 1097, sponsored by Councilmember Riley, would require retail stores that primarily sell food for off-site consumption and retail stores that include a pharmacy to accept flexible benefit cards distributed by health insurance providers. The committee looks forward to hearing a testimony from DCWP and other stakeholders about the city's enforcement of consumer protection laws in retail settings. So first, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Councilmember Riley, who's the sponsor of 1097. I know he worked very closely in conjunction with Councilmember Marte, who'll also be making a statement on this bill. So Councilmember Riley.
Thank you so much, Chair Menin. Good afternoon, Chair Menin and my colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this critical piece of legislation. Our communities deserve easy and equitable access to essential food and pharmacy services. Yet too many New Yorkers, particularly seniors, people with disabilities, and low-income families struggle to find stores that accept their flexible benefit cards. With big chain pharmacies closing in communities that need access the most, Intro 1097 takes a necessary step in ensuring that retailers that already accept credit and debit cards also accept flexible benefit cards, closing a major gap in accessibility. For many, these benefits are a lifeline, helping them afford nutritious food, medication, and wellness products. Yet barriers to use these cards force individuals to travel further, pay out of pocket, or go without. That is unacceptable to the City Council. Intro 1097 not only expands the access, but ensures accountability. The Department of Consumer and Workers Protection will conduct outreach and education to ensure compliance, while civil penalties for violation will reinforce this bill's impact. This legislation is about equity. It's about ensuring every New Yorker, regardless of income, mobility, or zip code can shop for the essentials they need close to home without unnecessary hurdles. I urge my colleagues to support this bill that helps break down barriers to essential goods, ensuring that all New Yorkers, especially those in greatest needs, have seamless access to food, medicine, and wellness products. And I would like to give a special thank you to my co-prime sponsor, Councilmember Marte, for working really, really hard on making this bill accessible for New Yorkers. Thank you, Chair Menon.
Thank you so much. And now let me turn it over to Councilmember Marte for his statement.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank Chair Menon for the hearing this bill today and Councilmember Riley for introducing and working with me to get it to this point. We are here today to discuss Intro 1097, which will require most businesses to accept OTC cards. OTC cards are benefit cards similar to EBT that seniors and people with disabilities can get from their health insurance that provides hundreds of dollars a month for them to spend on healthy groceries and medicine. These cards can be literal lifeline for these people who need access to affordable, fresh products the most. Yet many businesses in New York City do not accept them. What makes OTC card different from SNAP and EBT is that these benefits do not roll over every month. If you don't use the benefit, you lose it. Again, if you don't use it, you lose it. We drafted this legislation after constituents in my district of Lower Manhattan told me that they had to go to a fine fair in Brooklyn to find businesses that accepted their OTC card. That is unacceptable. Nobody should have to travel to another borough just to have affordable health groceries and to purchase their medicine or prescription needs. We also know that this legislation will work. In 2023, my office sent letters to over 100 businesses in my district informing them about the OTC card and requesting them to start accepting them. Now businesses all over my district, from the mom and pop shops in Chinatown to the large supermarkets like Metro Acres, are advertising that they now accept OTC cards. Introduction 1097 will do this citywide, informing business owners about OTC cards and their benefits of accepting them. If we pass this bill, it will be a win-win solution. OTC card holders will be able to buy healthy food locally, and business owners, especially small business owners, will see increased revenues from OTC card holders having thousands of dollars to spend at their local store. Finally, I'd like to thank local community activists like District Leader Ron Thomas and Cheryl Freeman, among others who have been advocating and organizing around this issue for years. I look forward to our hearing today and for a quick passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me also acknowledge a couple other colleagues who are on Zoom. Majority Whip Brooks Powers, Councilmember Abreu, Councilmember Osei. Under our council rules, for Majority Whip Brooks Powers has a bill, but will make her opening statement once we have quorum for this committee. So I'm going to move on, and we will now call representatives of the administration to testify. We will be hearing today testimony from Assistant Commissioner of External Affairs, Carlos Ortiz, and Associate General Counsel, Andrew Schwenk. I'll now turn it over to committee counsel to administer the affirmation.
Good afternoon. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection. My name is Carlos Ortiz. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for External Affairs at the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, and I am joined by our Associate General Counsel, Andrew Schwenk. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee today on these bills and our consumer protection work. DCWP provides fundamental consumer and worker protections and financial empowerment programming to New Yorkers. We strive to ensure that consumers who have been deceived or exploited have recourse, that workers have a passionate defender of their rights, and that all New Yorkers have the support they need to improve their financial health. We are immensely proud of the work our agency accomplishes day in and day out for our city. And in the last 3 years alone, under Commissioner Mayuga's leadership, we have helped deliver more than $1 billion back to New Yorkers. Since our landmark consumer protection law was enacted in 1969, we have been the nation's leading municipal consumer protection agency. For nearly 60 years now, we have consistently leveraged our authority to protect New Yorkers from deceptive business practices, securing financial restitution for consumers whose rights have been violated by bad actors in the marketplace. In the last few years, our agency has conducted more than 140,000 inspections of businesses across the city and have issued nearly 50,000 summonses for violations of the law. These efforts have played a role in the recovery of about $25 million in financial restitution and debt relief for consumers. We are dedicated to providing protections to New Yorkers while working to facilitate compliance amongst businesses with the laws that we enforce. Businesses across the 5 boroughs have access to our educational materials, as well as direct outreach from our external affairs team. In the last several years, we have hosted nearly 400 business engagement and outreach events, reaching more than 30,000 business owners. Our Visiting Inspector Program, or VIP, provides new licensees the opportunity to receive an educational visit from one of our inspectors. In the last 3 years, we have been able to provide nearly 7,000 one-on-one VIP inspections to new businesses across the city. And last year, we opened up our Visiting Inspector Program to all brick-and-mortar retail businesses that are required to be in compliance with our laws, regardless of whether they are licensed business category. We look forward to working with the council to continue our mission of protecting consumers across the city while uplifting and educating our city's small businesses. Turning to today's legislation, Introduction 374 will prohibit businesses in New York City from setting a minimum dollar value greater than $10 for the acceptance of credit cards in selling, leasing, renting, or loaning consumer goods or services to the public. All businesses that accept credit cards would also be required to post a notice of such prohibition on or near any fixed point sale terminal, and DCWP would be authorized to enforce civil penalties for violations. DCWP currently requires businesses to post signage disclosing any limitations on a consumer's use of a credit card. We support prohibiting a minimum dollar value that is greater than $10. However, we have concerns that requiring businesses to post an additional sign describing that minimum value prohibition, as well as the current penalties outlined in the bill, could be overly burdensome. Additionally, it is important for our operations that complainants continue to use the 301 system and DCWP's online portal, including with assistance from our staff, in submitting complaints to the agency, rather than a new webmail complaint form. We look forward to working with the council on this legislation. Introduction 1049 would require businesses to disclose a pre-authorization hold in connection with the sale or offer for sale of any petroleum product for use in motor vehicles or motorboats. We support the intent of this legislation and its efforts to ensure New Yorkers have access and can utilize their money. We are anxious to hear more from council and all impacted stakeholders today. Introduction 1097 will require retail stores that currently accept debit or credit cards to accept flexible benefits cards distributed by health insurance providers. DCWP would also be required to conduct outreach and education on this requirement. This bill tackles a new issue for the agency, and we're looking forward to hearing from affected consumers, businesses, and the council on the impacts of this legislation, not only to ensure that consumers can continue to shop at their local stores, but also to make sure that we do not impose any undue costs on businesses. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before your committee on our essential work uplifting New Yorkers and today's legislation. We look forward to working with you all to further our efforts to protect New Yorkers in the marketplace, and I welcome any questions you may have for further discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So I do have a number of questions. First of all, I want to talk broadly about the efforts of the agency to enforce the consumer protection laws specific, obviously, to retail establishments that we're talking about today. What is the agency's overall strategy for inspections?
So typically our inspection posture is, in terms of enforcement, is to either conduct patrol inspections or inspections upon complaint. I think with respect to patrol inspections or inspections upon complaints, if there's a violation that we observe at a particular business, we work also to prioritize that for a repeat visit as well, to ensure that that we're tamping down on any recidivist behavior. Whether it's patrol or whether it's a response to complaint, when an inspector goes into a business, what we do is they have a checklist that they're required to use depending on the category of activity that they've observed. They'll review this checklist and ensure that whether or not there's compliance. If they observe a violation, they'll issue a violation for that. And in fact, it is these same checklists that we work to distribute to businesses as an educational material so that they know exactly what it is our inspectors look for when we're in the field. I think generally, if we start seeing a pattern of complaints at a particular business, that could escalate at that point to more attorney-focused work, where we'll look deeper into the business, launch an investigation, as necessary, perhaps bring petitions to oath along those lines as well.
So one thing is, when I became commissioner in 2014, previously DCWP, well, previously it was DCA, but previously DCA had taken the posture in earlier years of assessing a lot of onerous fines on small businesses, so that if, for example, a bodega was selling a can of peas and it was priced incorrectly, these businesses were getting socked with really insane amounts of fines. And we changed that through our small business relief package to give businesses the opportunity to cure violations where there was no significant consumer harm. So what is the agency's posture in that regard?
I think you've hit the nail right on the head in terms of right-sizing penalties for the type of violation that's occurring. So I know the EO2 legislation that you championed, Chair, was a key component of that. But then also on the flip side, making sure that any type of deceptive activity that is really egregious, that the penalty matches that violation as well. And for example, I know Andy and I, we worked on an update to the consumer protection law in 2021 that updated fines for the first time in 50 years for the 21st century. Also made sure to capture certain online activity by retail businesses, and also made sure to take into account language access as well. So I think both of those components are critical. One is making sure that right-sized penalties match the violation, and particularly for our small businesses. We're not trying to put small businesses out of business. We want to make sure that they're in our communities. We want to make sure that they're serving consumers and employing workers. But on the flip side, when there are businesses that are engaging in knowing violations and unconscionable trade practices, that there is a penalty for that. That will stop that behavior.
So you mentioned the VIP, the Visiting Inspector Program. Are these inspectors, I have two questions regarding them. One, can you talk about the language access in terms of making sure that those inspectors are always sensitive to the fact that we've always need to go above and beyond on the issue of language access? And then secondly, are those inspectors telling businesses that they do have an opportunity to cure certain violations so that small businesses are aware of that?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember. I think actually our agency is somewhat diverse in terms of its language capacity. I know in past budget hearings we discussed of a staff of over 400, about half of those folks speak a second language, which I'm sure we're very proud of. Language access, the team of VIP inspectors is a team of, is it 3 or 2? I believe it's 3, but I can make sure I get the correct information for you. They each have, I think each of them have additional language capacity, but in general, they all use language line, which I know is not always the ideal, but we want to make sure that if we do have a situation where a business does not meet our language capacity, that we meet them where they are. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
The curing the violation.
Yes, so that's part of the materials that we distribute as well, letting folks know about I guess what would be the right word? Their abilities to settle, their ability to cure, ways that they can reduce their fine, particularly in the first instance. We can add it.
Yeah, and Councilmember, I would also just add there that for in the event that we do issue a summons to a business, we do notify the business of any of their abilities, either to cure or to settle those violations. And that's through a letter we send out, laying out their options to do so and how they would go about doing it. And that goes out for every summons if cure or the ability to settle is available.
Okay, and now I want to switch to the consumer perspective. So how is the agency currently notifying consumers of their rights?
So that would, I think, fall perhaps more into my bailiwick on the external affairs side. We conduct a significant outreach, I think close to 1,700 events over the course of the past 3 years, around 700 of those focused on consumer protection specifically. Realistically, for the team our size, I know our last hearing I mentioned it's about, it went fully staffed, it's 5 people. For a team our size, it's important to make sure that we leverage community-based organizations, and I like to tap into regular meetings that they're holding. I think that helps expand our footprint and meet consumers in their neighborhoods. And then on top of that, we have regular webinars as well. We do frequent canvassings, particularly at high-traffic subway locations. And then we have our social media team as well that does a lot of great work to try and be engaging there. So it is really about engaging outreach in a way that is both broad and deep as well in reaching our communities.
And how many complaints did you get last year for consumers about violations of consumer protection laws in retail establishments? And can you also talk about recent years, so we're not just looking at it isolation of 1 year?
So I would say overall complaints and, overall complaints the past year, I would say we're to 26,000 in 2024. In 2023, it was about 23,000, and then in 2022, again, 26,000. And generally, those complaints really do relate to consumers and their retail experience and whatnot. But let me throw it over to Andy, who could add some more color on specific violations related to retail.
Yeah, I would just add, Councilmember, that it's tough to sort of narrow down the focus to just quote unquote retail establishments. You know, most of the conduct that we receive complaints about under our consumer protection work does apply to retail businesses. You know, as I'm sure you remember, we don't regulate the business-to-business transactions, and our consumer protection law does not apply to those transactions in most instances. And so we think that total complaints is kind of a better reflection of the retail experience.
And how many violations have been issued in recent years? And are you seeing any trends in these violations?
Violations in 2024, a little over 19,000. 2023, close to 16,000, and in 2022, 14,000. So there's been a slight increase in violations there. I would say, I would say you know, in recent years, we've had to tackle a lot of focusing our efforts in the tobacco space, for example, or in e-cigarette retail dealer space. I think that's something that we've certainly worked on in coordination with our sister agencies at PD and the Sheriff's Office.
Okay, I have a number of additional questions, but I want to at this point turn it over to my colleagues to see what questions they have. Okay, Councilmember Riley.
Thank you, Chairman. So good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. Just want to talk briefly about Intro 1097. Have you guys been receiving influx of complaints for businesses that can't accept OTC cards?
I would say that we have not received a large influx of complaints. You know, I think for me, certainly in my exposure to consumers and New Yorkers, this is a new issue. Although I would echo the sentiment that you and Councilmember Marte shared about ensuring that our consumers have the ability to shop at our local stores. I mean, I think that's critical to New York City. So just to put a finer point on my testimony as well, we certainly want to work with you all in making that a reality and hearing from businesses, especially today, on like how we can help them meet that goal too.
Thank you, and I appreciate your willingness to hear that out because just across the street from my office on 940 East Gunner Road, we just lost a big Rite Aid pharmacy that closed down last year. Around the corner is 3 Mitchell Lamas over there that's full with tons of seniors who were going to that Rite Aid to get their medicine, to get a lot of the necessities that they need. So that's why we really wanted to think about this bill and kind of be more comprehensive on how, you know, we're setting up, you know, the economic opportunities for our consumers to actually be able to support their needs. So I'm really looking forward to, you know, more conversations and seeing if we could turn this into fruition.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think the same from us. We're looking forward to working with you on this.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Marte.
Yeah, I want to just plus one on what Councilmember Riley said. You know, nationwide, we see big box pharmacies closing, whether it's a Rite Aid, whether it's a CVS, and recently we started seeing Amazon take OTC cards online for some of their produce. However, we want to support our mom and pop shops and our local businesses, and so we do think there's a real need for 1097 to pass. One question I have is, do you believe that there will be any unreasonable cause for business owners to start accepting OTC cards?
I'm not particularly sure, to be honest. I think OTC cards in this space is something that's new for me. But that being said, I think that's what we want to learn today. I think it's also important to note that the bill builds in an educational period. I think we also could have some recommendations too on how to have some small business supports, like $0 penalties, for example, on the first violation that ensures that we're moving businesses in the right direction, but not being overly punitive in the first instance. And that might actually work in the long term better than in a year education period. But again, I think we've been working in this space a long time. I think we have lots of ideas we'd love to share.
Great. And based on your experience when we were rolling out, whether it's SNAP or EBT cards citywide, what were some of the obstacles did you guys encounter for small businesses or big businesses to adopting those type of payment softwares?
Yeah, I think on the EBT side, I think that's typically, I know I've seen kind of when a consumer has been scammed in an EBT instance, that's usually something more handled by HRA. So I'm not really as familiar with the software that we use, but I think, if anything, it's something that we can make sure we speak with our colleagues about to gain that better understanding if we have to roll this out.
Okay. And does DCWP have the ability and resources to send educational materials to all the businesses that will be affected under this bill?
Well, I think we try to focus on in terms of our outreach, we try to focus most immediately with our current licensees as a ready list that we can leverage. We work very closely with the health department as well as another mechanism for us to be able to reach folks too. I think on the outreach team, I'm certainly can try and be very creative in making sure we reach businesses. I should also mention too that VIP is now open to non-licensed businesses, and that's going to be something we would fold into that education as well. So there's lots of different ways we can do it. I think in the FIS we put in as well, we did request an additional inspector. That's more on the enforcement side, but I didn't want to leave that unsaid either. Yeah, I think we have certainly the ideas and experience for implementation here.
Awesome. I appreciate your testimony, and I want to work with you to seeing this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Councilmember.
Great, thank you. I'm now going to read an opening statement from Majority Whip Brooks Powers, who has joined us on Zoom, and then I'm going to ask a couple questions that she has submitted. Thank you for holding this important hearing and for the opportunity to discuss my legislation, Intro 1049. This bill addresses an unfair and often costly practice that too many consumers experience when purchasing gas. When a driver pays at the pump with a credit, debit, or a benefit card, gas stations frequently place a pre-authorization hold, sometimes exceeding $100, on their account. While this practice may protect merchants, it can have serious unintended consequences for consumers. For those using benefit cards, these holds can result in the permanent loss of funds if they are not released before the benefits expire. Last year, we heard from a constituent who used their benefit card to purchase just $20 of gas, only to have $150 held for 3 days. By the time the hold was lifted, the month had ended and their benefits expired. That money was gone. No one should lose access to essential resources due to lack of transparency in payment processing. Intro 1049 would require gas stations to clearly disclose these pre-authorization holds before a transaction occurs. Consumers deserve to know when their funds might be temporarily inaccessible, and this bill ensures that transparency. I look forward to hearing from our panelists today and working with my colleagues to advance this critical consumer protection. And now I'm going to go on to read the questions that Majority Whip Brooks Powers has. The first one is, as my bill, Intro 1049, is currently drafted, DCWP will be able to determine what language is included in the notice posted in gas stations. One important element of this notice is to ensure consumers know that they can speak to a gas station attendant to avoid paying a pre-authorization hold. Would DCWP be willing to include this specific language through the rulemaking process if Intro 1049 is passed?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Council Member. I think we're more than happy to work with your team on both amendments to the bill during the redlining process, and as a part of that, very happy to talk about our rulemaking authority there. I think if we wanted some concept specific about the ability to avoid a pre-authorization hold, that may be something we want to put in the bill language itself and not leave to the chance of rulemaking, and then we could develop the specifics through the rulemaking process, but more than happy to incorporate that into.
Okay, great. So just to be clear, so you'll follow up with the Majority Whip's team on that to discuss it directly with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, terrific. Second question that she has is, while this bill focuses on gas stations, pre-authorization holds are also common at hotels, rental car companies, and other businesses. Does the administration see value in expanding this bill to require disclosure across all industries where pre-authorization holds are used?
I think, I think admittedly we came prepared to talk about the category of businesses defined here. I think, this is something we'd certainly be open to and supporting the intent behind. I'm not as familiar actually with that happening in other industries. So I think if folks did testify to that, that's something we definitely have to look at. And let me say again from the top as well that we are in agreement with the majority leader that folks who have money, they should be able to use that money and shouldn't be held back from them. So I think we want to work with the majority leader on this bill. In terms of more categories, I don't know. I think if they have more information for us to look into, I think that'd be very helpful to understand.
Okay, great. Just to clarify the majority whip, but thank you so much. That's wonderful. We will make sure that she knows that. The last one is, given the significant impact on individuals using government benefits, what additional measures can be taken to protect low-income New Yorkers from losing access to their funds due to delayed hold releases?
I think for us, one thing to note is I know we always work very closely with the law department on these sort of bills. I think in terms of regulating any of these spaces, we want to make sure that we bring them in the conversation as well. They have a lot of expertise for us here that we can use to make sure we're tightening up any language for these bills.
And I would also just add to that, I think we've already had some ideas on how we'd like to, I think, improve some of the language in the bill to broaden both the disclosure aspect here to make sure all consumers who are using gas stations can see and access this language prior to making the transaction. And so that could be a piece that would assist in furthering the goals of this bill to make sure consumers know before swiping their card what's going to happen on the back end.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to continue now with my questions, which go back to consumer complaints. So when does a consumer complaint about a violation of the consumer protection law escalate to an investigation or to a broader-based enforcement action?
I think in general, when we have individual complaints coming in from a complainant, I think our first step is to kind of triage that, understand the intake process that it requires. Should that be referred directly out for an inspection? Should that be referred to a mediator? And do we have the appropriate information to do either one? And then I think in any point, if we start seeing patterns of complaints, multiple complainants coming in about a particular business, that's when we, I think, would trigger an investigator and attorney action at that point.
And what types of proactive investigations has the agency done in this sphere?
Yeah, so I think, last year we did have a number of major cases that we were able to resolve that were certainly proactive instances of us engaging with violations that we were observing. Last year we did announce a major settlement with 26 Motors, which is a secondhand auto dealer that secured about $1.8 million in restitution and penalties. We also received a default judgment of $3.7 million with respect to Dorm to Dorm, which is a moving company. Was that right? A moving company? And then the last piece we announced about $700,000 in restitution penalties related to RG Ortiz for really deceptive and terrible business activity too.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, Councilmember, on the Dorm to Dorm case, I think that's a good example of what Carlos just explained about our complaints process. Our consumer services and mediation team noticed a pattern, a kind of big jump in complaints about this specific business, and that was referred to attorneys within my division, our agency, who took a closer look and found a real problem occurring there, contacted the consumers and was able to bring this case and receive a large money judgment there. And so I think it's a pretty good example of kind of how that process works from complaint submission to a lawsuit.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about the fact that there has been a very significant increase in tobacco and e-cigarette retail inspections, particularly related to enforcement against unlicensed cannabis stores?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Council Member. Yeah, I think over the last couple of years, I think all of us in our communities have seen a proliferation of smoke shops and businesses selling tobacco, and I think the city and administration as a whole has responded to that with enforcement. DCWP has been a part of that. As I'm sure you know, we're a part of the task force that's focused on this issue. And so I think that has resulted in at least a focus of enforcement efforts in that space. Of course, we license tobacco retail dealers and electronic cigarette retail dealers, and so we always have an eye on compliance with those laws and rules in any year. But in response to recent trends, we have taken a closer look.
And I would say too, prior to the mayor being able to secure greater enforcement authority on these unlicensed cannabis stores, I think it was really kind of a creative mechanism we were able to utilize to recognize that these stores were also selling products that were governed by our laws and rules. They were also selling cigarettes, also selling vapes, and we were able to leverage our enforcement authority when there was sort of a gap happening at the state. And even prior to the task force taking a bigger role in this space and being able to, I think it was beginning their Operation Padlock to Protect. We also ourselves independently were able to seal, I think, over 160 of these illegal stores using our own authority. So it was, I think we figured out a way to make sure that we can contribute, and particularly on the route to the greater authority the city secured.
What about the cashless establishments? How is the agency enforcing the prohibition on cashless establishments?
So when the cashless ban took effect in 2020, I think our first approach there was education first, particularly just leaving the pandemic. And I think whenever we noticed through complainants or our own observations that business was violating the cashless ban, we would begin first with cease and desist letters. And then if we continued receiving complaints, we would send out inspectors as well. And in certain cases, there were some pretty egregious recidivist violators of the law. I think Van Leeuwen ice cream was one of them that we were able to have a good judgment against. And that was certainly our initial posture there. Over the past 8 months, I think while we have seen complaints overall decrease, we have, I think, also begun incorporating the cashless prohibition more and more into each of our inspections. So it's something that just an inspector will look for right away when they're going through the inspection checklist, and will issue a summons right away if they observe a violation.
Oh, did you have something else to add? No. Okay. So our analysis of agency data indicates that DCWP has been mediating fewer consumer complaints each year since 2016. So I wanted to dig in and understand why that is so. What do you attribute that to?
I think there are. I think there's on the one hand, I think there are certain data differences that make it difficult to compare apples to apples between now and 2016. Certainly, I think when you're at the time intaking and triaging and what complaint gets assigned to mediator versus now perhaps an invalid complaint or a complaint with insufficient information would not be assigned to mediator and hence would not fall under the captured data. That said, I don't want to discount that we probably have had a decrease in mediated complaints, and we have ourselves been working and thinking of how we can be more accessible to taking in complaints. And I think, for example, our new DCWP portal is a great example of that, and has led to an increase of mediated complaints since last year. And I think Andy can add more about what the portal has done to be a better tool for New Yorkers.
Yeah, on the portal specifically, to start with, I want to encourage anybody who does have a consumer complaint to please go to our website and use the portal. It was developed with this very issue in mind. The portal allows individual modules for different types of categories of complaint to make sure that the consumer is able to submit information that needs to be submitted for DCWP to take action. And that's always a problem we face, is ensuring that the complaints we receive actually have information that allow us to take action on them, whether it be through mediation or ultimately an inspection. And the portal is a great tool for that. And we are watching the numbers and are open to making tweaks to that to improve it even further in the future. And I would add that launched in July of 2023. So it's something that we're regularly monitoring right now. And I guess sort of on the larger question about data, I would just add, we were able to review the committee report this morning. And I think at least some of the data presented there on consumer mediations may be dated because of our database rollover that occurred in 2023. So the data cuts off, I think, mid-2023. We do have updated data, of course, happy to share that anytime. And I think, for 2023 and 24, the number of mediated consumer complaints is up a little bit above 2,000, back to kind of the levels it was at closer to pre-COVID. So I think, to Carlos's earlier points, it's always tough to do an apples-to-apples comparison with this data, but we are always proud of what we have mediated in this space.
Okay, and look, the portal is great. I still remain concerned, though, about the mediation numbers, and I guess the question, which I always go back to, is resources. Would you attribute that to the agency needing more staff? Because you're being asked, as I've said again and again, to do all the time more with less.
Yeah, I think, no, I know you are a passionate advocate for this agency, and I appreciate the resources question in this aspect. I think it'd be premature for us to say right now if this is a resource question. I think we are tackling ourselves to make sure we understand this kind of these complaint trends and how we can get mediated complaints up to previous levels. I think a number I saw was around, there were 3,000 plus mediated complaints in 2016. I think right now we're in 2,200 about. To me, I think I really want to understand what brought us down there before saying if we needed more resources or not.
Okay. The last question I have is in regard to intro number 374. You'd mentioned in your testimony that you were concerned that if the businesses were required to put a sign up about the minimum purchase, that could be onerous for small businesses. So does the agency have alternatives that they recommend because you want it if this law is going to be enacted, obviously you want to make sure consumers know about this. So how could consumers know about it if there's no sign present when they pay?
So I think for us, we would certainly think about how we could incorporate the prohibitions in Instruction 374 into our existing disclosure requirements on credit card limitations. I think just adding a second sign, I know it's a frequent feedback loop that we receive from businesses that there's just a lot of disclosures they have to put up, and at times can even be a little bit disorienting on the consumer side of things. That's why we're thinking we kind of like integrating some of this stuff into one sign. But then I think Andy also has something he'd like to add too about credit card uses in general in the city.
Yeah, I think some of our concern just stems from the fact that there is already a requirement to post credit card limitations in businesses, and that's something that we're always on the lookout for. We enforce it in all of our retail inspections, and that does let the consumer know that any type of limitation, whether it be a dollar amount or certain types of credit cards, we only take Visa, MasterCard, whatever the case is, those policies do need to be posted so the consumer knows about them. And so an additional broad signage mandate here could be burdensome. And I think I'd also add, we'd be interested in, of course, working with council during the redlining process. I think some of the language in the current draft of the bill may be overly broad in that it applies to every business that is doing retail in the city, whether or not it has a credit card minimum requirement at all. So I think some of these issues that I think we can work through. And then finally, I would add that there's a new state law, a newish state law that was passed last year that requires businesses to post the total price for using a credit card. So that both kind of hits on credit card limitations and also price transparency issues, where we want to ensure that consumers are not caught off guard and charged a higher price for using that card. That state law, as I said, was passed in 2024, and we're in the process of implementing it right now, and DCWP will be enforcing it soon. So I think there's a lot going on in this space, and a lot of good protections for consumers that we're sort of already focused on.
I think our goal would definitely be for these laws our existing regulations, 374, the credit card surcharge, to work together in tandem holistically. And yes, I think there will soon be rulemaking that we welcome your offices all being able to participate in as well.
Great. Thank you. I just want to mention we've been joined by additional colleagues, Councilmember Krishnan, Councilmember Brewer. I once again want to open it up to my colleagues for any questions that they might have. Oh, great. Councilmember Brewer.
I'm obviously going to say thank you for your amazing work with the newsstand on 79th Street. I can't tell you how much joy people have on seeing Sammy return, much thanks to you. My question is just generally on newsstands, because you do supervise them or oversee them. There are some now that are literally selling only telephones and, you know, nothing to do with newsstands, candy, or anything else. So my question is how much force staff is focused on that? I love newsstands. They're part of New York. And they obviously can't make money on the news business. And so how are we sort of thinking about newsstands today in 2025? Is that something that has come up? Is that something you're thinking about, et cetera? We don't want them to break the law, but if the law doesn't make any sense, then should we be doing something different? I don't know. But this one newsstand I'll bring to your attention has more telephones, an illegal product, than exist in many places.
Thank you for the question, Council Member. I think in terms of your one of the first parts of the question of our staff capacity, we generally in our enforcement team have about, sorry, I'm going to do quick math here. It looks to me a little bit close to over 40 inspectors. 23 of those are really focused on the borough enforcement, which is some of the patrol work that we do and in response to complaints. I think if we're seeing any newsstands engaging in illegal activity, we'd be happy to take a look at them and route an inspector in that direction. I think your underlying point is a good one, that there are limitations in terms of what can be sold that are in local law. I think at any point we're happy to engage in that conversation with the council and seeing what makes sense, particularly for the 21st century.
I assume that there are fewer newsstands than there have been in the past. Is that a correct statement? Do you know?
I think that is correct, just based on just my experience in some of this space. I think we're somewhere around 200, 300 newsstands. I think historically that was way higher. It's an interesting industry. I think it certainly has different aspects that could be addressed.
I mean, I think they are the eyes and ears often on the street, and they're very supportive of pedestrians and pedestrian traffic. Go ahead. What can we do to keep the pedestrian eyes on the street, make them able to make a living, et cetera? It's not a big issue, but for those of us in Manhattan, it has a lot of support.
No, I think for your point about the particular newsstand we're able to assist with, I'm glad we were able to cut through some of the red tape and really get to the bottom of what was a complicated case. I think many newsstands do end up being in Manhattan, so perhaps maybe why they're more beloved in this particular borough. But for us, 333 newsstand licenses.
Okay.
We're happy to talk through this more.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes our questions for the administration. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And now I'm going to open up the public comment period. So I first of all want to remind members of the public this is a formal government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but they may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant at Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic, which is consumer financial experiences in the retail industry and introductions 374, 1049, and 1097. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony that you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant at Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. I am now going to call the first panel. Stephen Rivera. Andrew Winokur, and Ben Thomas. If you could please come up. Thank you. Just identify yourself, please. You could begin. Thank you.
Sure, Andrew Winokur.
Let me just ask you, Andrew. So Stephen Rivera and Ben Thomas or Ron Thomas are not here? Sorry. I'm sorry. I couldn't read it. Ron Thomas. Sorry about that. Please come forward. Thank you so much. And Stephen Rivera is not here. Okay. Thank you. Please begin. Thanks so much.
My name is Andrew Winokur. I'm the president of ProHealth Connect. We're a healthcare fintech platform that supports independent retailers in their acceptance of OTC and grocery benefits. Implementing legislation that mandates retailers to accept over-the-counter and grocery benefit cards, also known as flexible benefit cards, can significantly address issues related to food insecurity, enhance access to culturally appropriate foods, and improve health outcomes through culturally connected diets. Food insecurity affects millions, limiting consistent access to nutrition food. By requiring retailers to accept OTC and grocery benefit cards, beneficiaries can utilize their health plan allowances to purchase essential groceries, thereby reducing hunger and promoting better nutrition. For 58% of multicultural Americans, food plays a crucial role in connecting them with their cultural heritage. This sentiment is particularly pronounced among Asians and Hispanics. Consequently, these consumers actively seek food products and brands that facilitate this connection for the preservation of their heritage. Access to culturally relevant foods is vital for diverse communities. Initiatives such as Grow NYC's OTC network have partnered with health insurance companies to allow individuals to use their OTC benefits at local markets, enabling the purchase of fresh, locally sourced produce that aligns with cultural dietary preferences. This approach not only supports nutritional needs, but also respects cultural food practices. Access such as this needs to be expanded. Consuming culturally familiar foods can lead to improved health outcomes. The Food is Medicine movement emphasizes the inclusion of nutritious food as part of healthcare coverage, equating its importance to that of prescription drugs. Access to healthy food is critical for preventing and managing diet-related chronic diseases, which affect a significant portion of the population and result in substantial healthcare costs. Access to culturally connected foods has been shown to improve health outcomes through various clinical studies.
If you could please just wrap up. Thank
Sure.
you.
Integrating culturally relevant dietary practices into health interventions can enhance acceptance and effectiveness, particularly in managing chronic diseases. In summary, requiring retailers to accept flexible cards can play a crucial role in reducing food insecurity, providing access to culturally appropriate foods, and enhancing outcomes through diets that honor cultural traditions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ron Thomas. I'm the district leader for the 65th Assembly, District Part B. And I'm here to speak on behalf of the many of my aging members of my district in regards to having the over-the-counter bill passed. I had a kidney and pancreas transplant in 2018 because I had a failing kidney due to my diabetes being out of control. That being said, since then, I've been in the best health of my life. Thank God for the over-the-counter program. I tried the vegan diet, but I love a good fish, so that didn't work out. So I'm here because a lot of my constituents have either issues with getting around in their wheelchairs, so they would have been here today, but they're older. We're all getting older. So on behalf of that, I have to travel all the way to Stop and Shop by Barclays Center to get groceries, which we can have Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or are nearby, what they call them, the bodegas, to accept the over-the-counter card. It's been imperative for me to change my diet, which I have, but as we know, eggs are like $9 now for a dozen. I've actually paid $9.74 for a box of strawberry banana Cheerios, which was incredible. So we asked that the bill be passed as an initiative, or this is a wellness program that a lot of insurance companies want to see people that have preventable diseases or diseases that can be controlled. Being in the healthcare industry with my doctors and dealing with them, their greatest challenge is saying that dealing with people that have diseases that can be treated or that can be controlled, such as diabetes and high blood pressure. So I'm asking the board if you can please consider passing the Use It or Lose It bill. We have one chance to use it. You get the money per month. Some agencies like Humana or Health First, they get it every quarter, every 3 months, but it's a huge benefit for the community and for people like myself that have pre-existing conditions or that are trying to deal with leading a healthier lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this panel? Councilmember Marte.
Yeah, one question. What is the cost for a business to accept this form of payment?
In most instances, it doesn't cost the business anything. The only time they generally would pay is the equivalent to like credit card processing fee when there's actual purchases made at the store.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Ron.
Today. Thank you. So if we've inadvertently missed anyone who's registered to testify today and is yet to be called, please speak with a sergeant, or if you are remote, use the Zoom hand function and you'll be called in the order that your hand has been raised. Okay, seeing no additional hands raised, I'm going to close the hearing. Thank you all so much for being here.